it up. There we go. Oh, actually, let's wait to record
No,
for.
it's not yet. We have online this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us to take the art piece of palliative care forward. Many of us may struggle with the writing, but I want to say that one picture can say 1,000 words. And the African Palliative Care Association felt that this is a resource that we have not explored. And we can indeed build our capacity to take images or pictures that say 1,000 words, images that tell stories of change, stories of impact, images that empower patients and families, images that empower healthcare providers and policymakers to tell their stories. And this afternoon, we are indeed delighted to host is a distinguished photographer, Carolina Kron. And she's going to give us some tips on how to bring all this to life. And remember, this session is going to be recorded and it is going to be availed as an open resource via the African Palliative Care Association website. And I acknowledge our supporters on this, the True Colors Trust. So a warm welcome to all of you. Feel at home, enjoy the art, relax, get the nuggets to empower you to write stories, write excellent proposals powered by images that are catchy and take what it takes. Karibu. Over to you, Carolina. I'll give you an opportunity to briefly tell us about yourself, and then we delve into the learning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eve. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So grateful to have this time together to explore the impact of imagery and to think more about what it is we are making when we are creating photography, imagery, and also just thinking about the world that we are surrounded with in terms of imagery. So grateful to be here with everybody today. And I want to start off, before we get into introductions, that, you know, I always feel it's important to, regardless of whether you're in a live session or in a recording, to just take a few moments and take a few breaths together, be grateful for this day that we have together. And so if everybody could just do that for just one moment, to just let go of what it is that we're doing today and that came before, and that all the lists that we have to do ahead of us. If we could just take one moment and breathe together, that would be fantastic. So when you're ready, just feel your feet on the ground. And if you're comfortable with closing your eyes, take a moment and just tune into your breath and try and clear your mind of all the things that are going around in your head for you today. And let's just take a few breaths together, trying to slow down our breath a little bit, extending that exhale. So much. And as Eve was saying, we put this together and really thinking about what it is to be making pictures, right? And my background comes very much with sort of a bunch of different aspects intersecting. One certainly is the making of images, both still and video, and one is certainly in the organizing and facilitation and education arena. And I spent many years in the news business, and then became sort of jaded with that experience a little bit, and turned more towards public access and teaching people how to tell their own stories. And within that, opened up a whole new world of media literacy and video literacy that really just encompasses sort of understanding what we're all taking in constantly in the world around us. So I'm so happy to always talk about this, and for people to be able to understand and utilize imagery for social change, for improving the ills of our world. And so I'm so grateful to be here today with everybody. And Eve, did you want to do any further introduction, or anybody else who wants to do an introduction?
Yes, I want to welcome the palliative care fraternity from Ghana, Kenya, Uganda. Hello, Mombasa. Hello, Mbale. Welcome, everyone. I can see we have lots of people joining us this afternoon, and I want to welcome you so much. Tonya from Nigeria, very welcome. Naum from Eldoret, Kenya, welcome. Anabo from Arua, welcome. Mohammed from Mombasa, welcome. Frederick from Ghana, and Isaac from Ghana. You're all very welcome to this session. I'll request that we continue introducing each other in the chat box, and then we can also put our questions in the Q&A Slido. And we'll have an opportunity to ask questions after the presentation. And at that point, you'll be free to unmute yourself. You can even put on your video and make a contribution. Those are the few announcements I want to make. And then I'll hand it back to you, Caroline.
Great, thank you. So first of all, I wanted to sort of set the stage a little bit for what we're going to be covering in this three-part series. So we are going to start off today with sort of the thinking about imagery, right? Before you even make a picture, how do we engage with imagery in the world around us, and what are our obligations as individuals and collective societies in terms of ethics, and sort of what the impact of photography can be. So today we'll be sort of looking at images and thinking about images, and sort of as a warm-up to more of the second part of the series, which will be covering sort of the basics of photography itself, and matching organizational communication goals with the imagery that one is making. And then for the third one, we'll look more in depth into not just the best practices for the making of the image, but also what to do once you have them. So, you know, how you organize your model releases, your captioning, your making sure that they're properly corrected, and the different resolution states, sort of more of the technical piece. So today, we are going to be talking about, as I said, all these different types of photography. And I wanted to start off, let's see here, I'm going to try and share my screen here. And hopefully this will behave for me, as I was having some issues earlier today. 1 second. Okay. So you are not seeing that yet, I assume. Okay, so I have to, I'm sorry, push one button that's not cooperating with me today. There we go. Okay, I'll find a workaround. Alrighty, so are you all able to see that? Hopefully, yes. Can, Eve, can you see this?
Yes, I see it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So just to start things off here, one of my favorite quotes here is that you'll notice that I rarely will say take a picture. That it's very critical to try and think about that switch in terms of that we're engaged in a process of collaboration, right? So Ansel Adams is one of my favorite photographers, certainly, and here I know he would certainly argue that his collaborator is this beautiful mountain and the sky and the beautiful light. Doesn't have to be necessarily people that we're talking about in terms of collaboration. And oftentimes too, as I know there's a mixed group of people within the webinar today, and for people that are seeing it, that communications is so dominant in visuals, but often for NGOs or community-based organizations, they're very word dominated. And we will certainly talk a little bit about that. And yes, I will certainly try to make this full screen. Let's see if that works. Is that a little better? Okay.
Looks okay.
Yeah, better? Okay. So the trick here, yeah, see, this is the trick that I have. All right, so I'm gonna have to stop for 1 second here and try. It keeps on popping me out when I, hang on 1 second, I'm gonna try a different way. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, this is gonna be challenging for me to do full screen. Was it difficult to see in the way I had it before?
Was okay.
It
It
was
was
okay.
okay to me. Yeah.
Okay. So okay. So I think that what I'll do then is actually could we there's a couple of different technical things that are happening on my end. I'm sorry that I am not I'm not able to do this simultaneously. All of a sudden my Zoom is blocking my other, okay. Okay. Okay, you can see this, yes? Okay. Eve, I think what I'm gonna do, yeah, I'm just, there's a glitch that's happening here. I'm unable to,
do the full screen share.
yeah, it's not, I think, give me 1 second. I have an idea. I'm gonna go see if I can find something on my phone that'll allow me to do this simultaneously. My apologies. So I will do this full screen. And then, okay. Great. Is that still working okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I can do it this way. Perfect. So I'm sorry about that. So the first thing too that I'm hoping that people had a chance to take a look at the video that was sent out from the visual literacy that where Eve and I actually met online technically. And I wonder if anybody had any questions or comments about that. Just as a reminder, people looked at it a few days ago. We looked at sort of how your brain processes images, right? There were a number of different things like that. There was an example that we talked about in there about sort of the differences of how your brain and works with images versus text, right? And we went through, there was an example that I gave about shark and about seeing the word. And so just as a reminder, right, and this was an image that we talked about in that session and compared and contrasted just as a reminder. So does anybody have any comments or thoughts or questions? If folks can just raise their hand, and Eve can call on folks. What did people think about seeing that video? What was your first response?
You can raise your hand or unmute yourself to make a comment. Yes, John. John, go ahead, give your comment.
My comment, okay, I just have a, I just want to have a comment on maybe from the presenter, something about legal issues about photography. What legal issues should we be aware of when we are taking photos or videos? What should be behind of our mind, at the back of our mind?
Okay.
So
John, that's noted.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that's a whole webinar right there. That's a great question. And we'll touch on that a little bit when we're talking about model releases and copyright and public and private in one of our sessions. Very important question. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments from the video, from the visual literacy video that we saw? Anything that was informative for you about thinking about text or images or how your brain works, how we add narratives to imagery?
Yes, Isaac. Isaac, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So from the picture posted now, I can see that the one at the right hand side is zoomed, and the other one is the original photograph. So the one at the right hand side is zoomed, and the other one is not.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And one more, anybody else? Anybody look at the video from before?
You're welcome to raise your hand and mute yourself and make a comment. Yes. Klaus, do you have a comment? Klaus? Klaus, please unmute yourself. Isaac?
Oh, hi, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi,
Thank you,
Klaus.
thank you. I wasn't able to speak for a moment. So are we just discussing the difference between these two images? what struck me was I mean, obviously, one has to talk about these things in global health, especially around the skin color. And in a way the perception about who is providing the resource and is it how who is at the receiving end. So in terms of how does it depict the power gradients, global north, global south. So it's quite powerful to say that the image on like Tanya has also said in the chat, how the image on the left depicts a certain kind of power gradient, about who has resources, who has and who can give, as opposed to who should be on the receiving end or who is on the receiving end, and how that image on the left perpetuates some of the inequalities that we are seeing. So especially from a resource and aid perspective. So it's quite powerful, the stark contrast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. Yeah, and just to clarify, I was also hoping that folks had a chance to see the video that I created with the Communications Network some years ago. So forgive, these were just reminders from that homework assignment to look at that video. So if there is a longer discussion in that video that was posted, and that was why I wasn't necessarily setting this up as an engagement, but thank you, Klaus. That's exactly what we were talking about in terms of how we all add narratives depending on, like in this particular case, the color of the skin of the hands, right? And somewhat, as one of the other participants added, the level of zoom, right? All of these things are factors. So hopefully if folks didn't get a chance to see that webinar, they can go back and look at it, and I'll try and bring in as much as I can into this as well. Okay, so thank you for those comments, and I want to move on to thinking about sort of just a real general sort of what do people think a good picture is. I'm going to start scrolling through just a few different images, and while we're doing this, what is it that makes a good picture? And if you could just put in the chat for me, I'm going to put a wide variety of things here. By the way, this is with consent, my cat Jackson. And what is it that makes a good picture? We're subjected to thousands of images. On average, the average human is exposed to over 2,000 images a day. And if you live in a big city, it's many more. So what makes a good picture in your mind? Tell me what it is. Okay. Clarity, beauty, a message, something different. Great, thank you, Catherine. Okay, it's a moment, right? It's very much about time we're talking about. Okay, good. The story, the gestures, visibility, perspective, great. The warmth, fantastic. Good. Mood, right? A lot of emotion, right? Perfect. The atmosphere and environment, right? Right, all of these, the details of different things, right, that are communicated. Great. Perfect. The commission, meaning where it comes from, John, is that what you were saying? Is that what that means there? Okay, great. And the commission is an interesting one, because that's where I was going to go to next. So if I'm understanding you correctly there, John. So what's a huge part of what it is that we're considering when we're seeing all of these different images, right? And when we experience them in the world, what's changing in all of these? Where are we seeing them? What is the thing that's changing when we're looking at these? The commission piece was getting to what I was thinking about. So a lot of these are going to be about the context, right? I believe that's what John was saying there too, right? Whoops, that's going ahead. So this type of image, you know, we consume in a lot of, right, they tell different stories, exactly. So this we probably won't see as a part of our phone collection, right? This is probably going to be in a news type of setting, right? Or, you know, there's this type of imagery we could see in advertising context, we could see in a magazine. This is also, you know, more of a professional grade photo, right? Same thing here. This probably will not be on our phones, right? This will just go by us, whether we're seeing it at a bus stop or on our computers or in that kind of context, right? So the context is very important here. Thank you for that, John. Right. Who is the assigner, right? Who is the person that is giving the commission? And in this case, right, with the advent of selfies and all the different photos that we take with our phones, right, we have that capacity as well. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for thinking about that. And the thing too that you know, we often I want to take a moment and think about what are things that images do besides sort of what we feel and sort of, but what do they do? What do they? Some of the things will be overlapped. And I'm going to move to a different screen here. And when you think about the potential of images, what is it that what can images do? When you looked at all those pictures, what was it that, besides creating your own response and emotions, what are pictures used for? What are the different ways that right, it can change your mood, exactly, perfect. It makes an impression, right? Shows emotions. Okay, very similar to what we were talking about with a good picture, right? So it's also a document, right, of a particular moment in time, and a 60th of a second, or it's a very small sliver, right, of time. And you know, the piece that of course is tricky is that it is a very narrow glimpse of time, right? It is not showing you, when we see Kilimanjaro, we know that there's a 360 beautiful thing around it, right? We know that, you know, we've become accustomed to seeing these little small snippets of time. So, right, fantastic, transformative. They provide information, right? And they're also giving you all kinds of messages all the time. And I go into that more in that video that we were just referencing. Okay, great, perfect. So the thing that is often not thought about, and in terms of the stereotype piece, I want to go back and show one thing. So, you know, for many people, you know, you learn about cultures, you're exposed to all kinds of things through imagery, but there's also a piece that is somewhat dangerous, I would say, in terms of all of the the varying aspects of what it eliminates, right? So, you know, there are plenty of people that, you know, think of, for us in this country, Native American people, and get a very specific image in their mind, right? And the stereotypes that are made in different countries and different places all have a huge impact on, you know, how we think about, you know, the world, really, right? So the piece that I want to show here, and I'm hoping this came back up, is that I met this gentleman who's an organizer in Chicago at a conference, and he works a lot in communications. And I just wanted to offer this, you know, when we're thinking about photos and all of the different very quick assessments that we're making, as those brain diagrams were showing, we process things very, very quickly. And just to remember, right, that all of these people that we're seeing, or mountains, or all of these different things, that are just a very, 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 very small piece, right? And that we need to make sure that we are trying to be respectful and honor the totality of people, and express through the correct captions and consent and trust of relationships, all of these various things. So the other thing too that I want to talk about, you know, is that it's very rare, you know, these days especially, there's, you know, the rise of artificial intelligence. There are more and more ways to create fake news and propaganda, and it leads to a longer discussion in terms of what's verifiable and what is truthful, right? And I think especially in the work of the community-based organizations and NGOs, it's imperative to come to the image-making process with a sense of what it is that you're trying to communicate, and be respectful of that process and the relationship that you are going to be creating with your subjects and with all of these images that you are making. So the one thing that you know, often does not get addressed is, you know, like the who, right? Who are the people that are creating these images in partnership, right? When we think about these images, right, you know, we don't often think about the photographers, right? When we see the, you know, they often are coming so quickly, we're not thinking about these types of rooms or setups, right? And that is a critical part of beginning to understand also how to be as a photographer, and also to begin gaining awareness around with the images that you see, right? We see this image and we don't think about, I mean, this is in a somewhat different context, but we don't think about the person with a camera, right? So, and the same thing here, right? You would rarely consider, you know, this huge number, even though you might see them go by on a TV screen, right? You don't think about this is a somewhat miraculous that there's a one woman in this very male-dominated field of sports photography, but carrying all these huge lenses, right? The working in the rain, like all of these different aspects we do not think of in terms of the people behind the photograph. And so I want to definitely encourage you to, you know, as you're beginning to look at images more closely, to really think about that in terms of, you know, what is the role of the photographer here? Who is the photographer? we'll get more into depth in the technical aspect of all the different aspects of how these types of images are made, right? And what the choices of lenses are here. And many people will be using phones, so we'll be talking about not this type of setting, but something that can illustrate how close people are to these people, or what the angles are, what the light is. All of these different aspects we'll be talking about as we go further in. And I did want to show one example that sort of proved my point, that there are a number of different ways that we also are influenced, right, by the different search engines and all of these different algorithms that are created around imagery. And the thing that is, each country has very different search engines, and the way that what it is that you're literally being shown on the screen when images come up, when you're searching for pictures, or really anything, right, in terms of the sequence that you are shown. And I wanted to show one example as I was doing some research for this webinar, was that, I thought, well, I was trying to find an example of a working photographer. So, I put this up, and, you can see that I tried to put in these different terms, right? And, I was like, oh, there's one photographer here, right? And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I'm specifically asking, and then I tried to put, okay, let's put in Senegal, get more specific with countries, right? And there's still, when you have the images that come up, they're guiding you, towards what they think it is that you're trying to say, right? So again, here, no sight of a photographer, right? These are all, weddings, they got that part. But again, they're like, oh no, you don't really want to look for the photographer. You want to see the actual pictures of the wedding, right? So kind of reinforcing the point of this sort of myth almost of the photographer and the camera being invisible. And as we know, it has a huge impact and influence on the different spaces that we're in. So I think I'm going to stop there and check in with everybody. Does anybody have any comments or questions at this point so far? Is there anything that I said that was unclear, or is there anything that people want to add to the conversation here?
I don't see any questions in the chat box.
Okay, I don't see that, Eve, so so I'm, oh no, there it is. Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, yeah, about the invisible photographers, right? And yeah, we'll definitely talk more in detail about that when we talk about the technical aspects of photography. And when anybody raises a phone or a camera, and what that does to the space, and also how we should be preparing for that, and preparing, especially if we're working with people that we have long-term relationships with, that we are very considerate in how we do that. Great. Oh, thank you for that, Noam. And I think at this point, why don't we take, we've had a lot of screen time. Why don't we take a break here, and we can pause the recording. And why don't we come back in 10 minutes if people need to stretch their legs or use the restroom, get some water, whatever it is that needs to be taken care of. So let's come back at 7:55 my time, which would be 3:55 your time. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then you have the question in here, Carolina, that
Yeah.
more talk on angle, lighting, distance, lenses, and perspective when taking photographs.
Yes, absolutely. And those
Yeah.
things we will all get into a lot more depth in our other sessions. Today, we're mostly beginning to sort of think about imagery and hopefully inspire you all to start looking at images a little bit differently, and we will certainly get into all of that in our next sessions. Thank you for that.
Perfect. And friends, if you have any photographs that you'd like us to use as case studies, please indicate that to me via chat, and we'll be happy to allow you share, and then we comment and grow as a team. Thank you. So let us stretch for the 5 minutes and then get back.
Yes, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good break. And as we were talking about putting together the series, in addition to the importance of sort of thinking about and understanding the environments that we live in and sort of all the background of media literacy and visual literacy that we were just talking about before, the ethical part of the whole relationship and the distribution of images was critical, and Eve had wanted to share some of the examples that she had experienced that I think brought more light to the fact of how serious this could be, and also that there have to be better ways that we can work with images and take ownership of the accountability and ethics that are involved in making images and distributing them. So, Eve, would you like to share some of the stories that you felt would be useful for the community?
Yes, I want to share a story about a photo that was taken of a physician giving a patient oral morphine at home. And it was a very nice photo. And it was being used continuously. And the caption depicted him as a clinical officer. And he was running a private clinic. So when several of his patients and friends read the stories that accompanied his image, they were realizing that he's actually being depicted as a clinical officer, not as a physician. And this really hit his business. It tarnished his image, and he was not happy at all about this. And he said, well, nobody came to me for proper approval to have my photo used in this way. I wouldn't mind it being used because I'm a pro-palliative care person, but it has to be used appropriately in a way that doesn't cost me my survival and professional achievement. And this was damage that had been done, and we couldn't withdraw all stories and magazines that had his image and his caption. And this is where I realized that this is very important. Somebody has the right to say that, pull down all these images, and then you're supposed to put an apology letter maybe on your website or wherever for a given period of time. And you don't want that to happen to you because it's costly So this is why we have to talk about these issues. And we also recall a popular artist, and somebody released an image of his body, and the body was partly naked, and this hurt the artist's family to the core. And everybody was like, who is this person who lacks compassion? Is this the way someone wants to be remembered for his very last minutes on earth? And this is very important for us as palliative care providers. Once you take this photo, the patient and family lose power. But remember, there are serious repercussions. People want to live with good memories of their loved ones. And then you've taken this photo. The patient is in a very vulnerable state, and you've put it out there. And whoever Googles to look up this individual is going to find these terrible last moments of the person. So we need to be as compassionate and as considerate as palliative care professionals. Before you press the button, think, what is the story? Is this how this person wants to be portrayed? And am I happy with whatever image I'm taking and the image I'm sharing out? I think that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eve, for sharing that. Yeah, and I'll put that out to everybody as well. You know, what else happens when an image, and in this case, it is more of the taking, you know, of an image, right? Some cultures believe that your soul is being taken when an image is made, and you know, what are other things that could happen, and especially now in the digital era, if images travel all over the world for people? What are other repercussions? What are things that can happen here if photos are distributed without consent? They can ruin people's reputations, as he was saying, and create a lot of work to restore them. Yes, they can absolutely edit photos and you know, make things a little different. They can alter them, right? So what are other things that can happen here, that in terms of the ethical dilemma that the photographer faces here? Any other thoughts or ideas on this? I think
I think
go ahead.
they can also complicate grief and bereavement outcomes.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that, right, exactly, invasion of privacy. So the thing, and I know we have a wide array of people's roles that are listening here and that will view this later on. But the thing too, that with photographers and, you know, are very similar, I was thinking in some ways, to the role of clinicians and healthcare workers, you know, because you are walking into the room and you're assessing many different things, right? And different people with different backgrounds and you know, are looking at different things. And the things though that you share are certainly the connection to the person, your humanity, and making sure that it's clear that they are willing to be involved in the making of a photograph, and that they understand the possible distribution, right? Because it's not just your own individual respect that will possibly be tarnished here. It's obviously the subjects. And also, if you're working with an organization, you're ruining the reputation of the organization, right? So those things are very delicate. And the piece that, you know, I often do not even lift a camera for the initial meetings with with people that are in complex situations or that are more sensitive subjects, right? Because that relationship and trust is so very important. And as somebody mentioned in one of the questions, the legal aspects are so important as well, right? So most countries have the line of delineation in terms of public and private, in terms of what is legal, right? So if you're in a public space, technically, but most countries, not all, but most countries, anybody could take a picture of you if you're in a public space, right? You do not have to give them a formal consent. But if you cross into private property or anything that is considered a private context, you do need consent and a model release. And this will vary country to country in terms of the exact legal terminology that you need. But it's very important. And I know culturally there's can be a tendency in some places that, your word is gold and that I have their word and I have their consent, but I don't know in the countries that you are in, but I, being in the United States, have a very litigious society, and having that protection in writing is important for you as an individual practitioner and also for the organizations that you're representing. And being very clear on how it will potentially be distributed, and making sure that the people that you're working with are in support of the mission of the organization, and also have final say in what the images that are being distributed are, right? That's a critical piece. And we'll get further into this as we talk more about the model releases. And this might be a good moment to say that we are putting together a resource sheet for everybody, and we'll be sharing that at some point as well. And I see this comment about right, taking pictures without consent, right? And right, the intentions are not always equivalent with the ramifications. I absolutely agree with that. Right, and the consent is critical. And especially in the digital era, I began as a photographer when we were still printing in dark rooms and distributing physical pictures. And I found an image the other day. I was working with on a story on homeless women with HIV at the time, and I had a box checked on the back of the image that said it could be published anywhere except within New York City. So the subject, who was here in New York, had decided that they just didn't want the HIV status to be disclosed in any publication in New York City, right? Assuming that people wouldn't see anything that was published out. Well, those days are obviously long gone. So, we have to assume always that even if it's published in a very small way, that it could travel across the world very, very quickly. And that's a serious responsibility in making sure that people are aware of that, and not taking advantage of one's position. And yes, I agree with that also, that people can use images to criticize organizations or individuals. That's absolutely true. Okay, and yes, and absolutely, John, I agree with that comment too, that we want to be careful in terms of recreating trauma for families, recreating, for generations to come. So one mistake can, leave, much trauma for entire families and communities. So it is very important to travel with utmost caution in these arenas. So when we're thinking about also imagery that, we see so many things, right? As we've talked about, thousands of images every day. And, we don't, if we're not thinking about the photographer, then we don't actually know if the image that we're seeing was created with an ethical framework, right? There's really no way to know, except for the individual knows it, and the organization, right, that is overseeing it will know, by its standards that it puts out. And I think there's this sort of myth that certainly in journalism schools and in sort of teaching of photography, that you have to be objective, right? In the news business, that you have to be objective. And I think there's been a lot of rethinking of that in recent times, and sort of acknowledging that we all come with very specific paths and lives, that we have very specific cultural influences, very specific things that influence our perspective. And the importance of being able to separate those aspects and be objective is practically impossible. We all come into situations with our own life histories, and the importance here, and we'll continue to get further into this as we go along in the series, is what are the communication goals and objectives of the organization that you're working with? What are you trying to convey, right? Is it, we're in such a word dominant world in some ways, even though we have these thousands and thousands of images that we're digesting, in terms of the making of photos and the distribution of them, there's a lot of thought and consciousness that needs to go into that pairing of, like, how do you communicate the fact that there's a new opioid that can be made and distributed widely, that how do you communicate that? How do you show that in an image instead of with words, right? And so these are some of the things that we want to sort of plant seeds of thinking about in terms of what would a visual look like, right? And I think the other thing too that I want to make sure to emphasize is that I know that it took a long time for me, to undo my assumptions and about both what people want to say and how they want to be portrayed in a story, and what they're willing to do and want to do with their own stories. And I think it's very important to come in with a perspective of question, and to really give people all of the agency and control of their own stories. And everybody will have a different way or a different perspective that they might want to share. And I know that even I spoke briefly about different ways that creating imagery can happen, whether or not people are telling their own story, whether they're, other people are making the photographs with them. And, I think it's really a great challenge. And I know that you all will have many discussions about this moving forward. Eve, did you want to talk about anything in terms of the competition that's coming up at this moment, or did you want to go through that later on?
Yes, we've had photo contests previously in palliative care, and I had someone here mention that was John, the photo that came from, was it the New Vision? And it was an image of a nurse using bladders to deliver vaccines to patients in families in a very remote mountainous area. And that photo won an award, a national award. So we also do that in palliative care. We want to recognize and award photos that showcase for the important work that is done even by the small organizations in the remote areas, the innovations that are happening in the very remote and small, humble ways. We know a lot of effort goes into this. And if we are not able to write, at least let's capture that moment in a professional manner and let's get recognized. So we intend to run a photo contest, and this course is really to prepare all of us. Let's move into having galleries, and let's use these photos and images to even power our proposals. This is the goal of this training and capacity building initiative. So we are going to have some awards for the outstanding photos. And that contest will be announced at a later point by the African Palliative Care Association. So please have a placeholder for that and take everything we are talking about here seriously. Thank you very much.
One thing too that I wanted to just show quickly, just to leave, I think we covered it fairly clearly, but just in case there was any misunderstanding. So if I were to put this up, right, and ask which one is the best photo, and there might be a variety of responses from everybody who's seeing this, right? And particularly for our purposes, the best photo would be the one that was consensual, that you have a release form for, and that your relationship, whether it was personally with the person that was making the picture or organizationally, were clear about what the image would be used for and where it would go. So this piece is the most important thing. Not the aesthetic part, which we will get much more into in the coming session, but the most important thing is that there is consent and awareness about where the image will go and the model release. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? We're going to be we're going to go through a little bit of homework for you all that hopefully you will be able to do and share back with us, and I'll go through that in a minute. But before we move on, see there's a couple. John, let's see. Is photography intrinsically developed, or it's an external effort? I think for me, the answer is both. And some people might have different thinking on this, but I think that one comes with, as we were saying, a very specific perspective, and that you can continue developing that, but you are constantly, not just in relation to the environment that you're around, but you're also, as you mentioned before, John, thinking about the commission, right? You're thinking about, what the goals of the organization that you're working with is, and does what you're showing reflect those goals, right? Is this an effective match of the visual communication goals of the organization? And so hopefully that answers some of that question. Thank you for that. And Catherine in the chat, how do we know which picture was consented to? Is there a way? Great question. I mean, you only know that from if you are the photographer, and then organizationally, if there are records, right? And we certainly will get into that in terms of how you track everything. So, for example, if I'm working on a particular assignment, I put together a folder that has a spreadsheet in it and all the photos that have been chosen as sort of the end use, right? And each of the person's name, contact information, the date that the photo was taken, and who any of the sort of constellation of people around them are, whether it be other family, friends, parents, daughters, all the different people or community members that would also be a close contact, right? And then also with a clear link to any model release that you have for them, and that will cover exactly the terms that you've agreed to. So, whether or not they have, 3 pictures that they've agreed to distribute or 30, right? And, those are all things that are tracked very closely. So it's really the people that are publishing out, into whether it's into the internet or into printing or any other media, and the photographer that know about the consent. And then question, what do you do in case you find out that you have used a photo with, I'm guessing, Justine, you're saying without consent instead of with consent. So I'm going to go with that. Correct me in the chat if I'm misguessing that. I mean, I think that you pull it immediately in as soon as you can if it's online, and you do your due diligence to try and get it down, even though, of course, once it's out, it lives on the internet. And if it's in a print situation or analog physical way, I would first go to the person and the community and take accountability for the mistake. And then I would also, in some cases, you can have other things published sort of after the fact. And oftentimes once it's done, it's done. But you can certainly find ways to publish apologies, or, at minimum, make sure that the people or the person that you have published without their consent is aware that and that it was a mistake, and then try to rectify that relationship as best you can. Okay, what are the standard gadgets? Oh yes, well, that's a whole other thing, John. And yes, I'm not going to get too much into what cameras to recommend or phones or anything of that in this particular series, but we can certainly do that on the resources page and try and provide you with some of that. And photo storage will also be gone through in the other series. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Who is to be awarded, the photographer or those in the photos? Eve, do you want to take this one? I'm assuming it's going to be the photographer, but it's an interesting question.
It's going to be the photographer. Maybe at some point we need to talk about the photographed, especially the children. I saw a photo of children taken by Kawempe Home Care, and it was fascinating. I felt like rewarding these children. Thank you, Naomi. It's going to be the photographer this time.
Recommended age. Oh, I have little 2 or 3 year olds who are naturals. And, I know no age. All ages are perfectly capable photographers. There are some I would say, caveats that depending on what kind of photography you do, if you remember back to the pool of sports photographers that had those very long lenses, right? Those are for focal lengths that are very zoom up, very close. Those are very heavy. So, you know, if you're in contexts where you have to be carrying a lot of equipment, you know, that as you get older can be more challenging. So, but now a lot of the mirrorless technologies are much lighter. And you know, there's different ways to work around that, but that's the only that would be the only restriction that I can think of. My cat's potentially going to make an appearance. And let's see, doesn't necessarily have to be a written consent, because some people write. So I'm glad you brought that up, Elizabeth. As I was saying, you know, I always err towards written. I know that there are cultural things around that, and perhaps we can think more about how to approach that. That, you know, it's a both and in from my perspective, because even though, you know, you are trustworthy to your word, if you get into any trouble legally, that is not going to be good enough. You need to have something in writing that is signed and dated and shows that whoever was signing it, or even if it's a parent signing for a minor, for example, which also needs to be addressed. If the person, I would have to double check what the different countries' age is throughout the African continent, but here it's 18. That if there's a minor involved, that the parent or guardian would need to be the person signing. So those are things to work on in terms of both, and also how to bridge what might be a very strong cultural preference and norm, and sort of strategies of how to move towards having both. Thank you for that. Okay, who has legal ownership of a photograph between the photographer and the photographed person? Also great question. Thank you for that. So, and I would have to triple check this in terms of copyright law and how it varies from country to country. Fairly certain that most of the world treats copyright as the moment that a picture is made, and that the photographer is the one that owns that copyright. Now, that being said, there are different agreements that are made between the photographer and, for example, you know, the organization that you're getting the commission from, right, or who you're representing. So they may have the contract with the photographer that they in fact own the photographs, or there's other models of shared ownership that exist. I know that especially in documentary practice and video practice, there's a movement towards both technically having ownership and then the capacity to distribute it, because it felt too much of a take, too much of a power grab for whether it be filmmakers or photographers to have complete ownership of the image. So those are all things that are important to negotiate and to consider in terms of the communities that you're working in, and also, you know, what's reasonable for you to be able to keep track of, to be able to monitor, and, you know, what pieces are most important for you along the way, right? So, you know, it might create more paperwork and more tracking for everybody to have to do an Excel spreadsheet that lays all out the captions, who the photographer was, the location, where the model releases are, etc. But then, you know, moving forward, and whoever continues the legacy of the organization and also the community relations are intact, and you're secure in that, and you have that track record of it. So many different ways that you can do that. Great question. Thank you so much. Okay, so I see Eve has put in a feedback form. So when you have a moment, please take a look at that. And then another comment here from Catherine. Some NGOs take pictures of a staff and place on social media platforms without permission. So these pictures should also have written consent from us, I feel, definitely. You know, and I think it's just a good practice in general to always have that written consent and to always have it be clear where things are going to be used, and make sure that everybody understands that and you know, is willing to sign something saying that they understand that, so that it's very explicit in its usage. Definitely. Okay, so I'm going to copy into the chat, put together a little bit of homework, just to sort of have folks continue to think about what we've talked about here, and sort of in preparation. I'm hoping this formatting holds up okay. That folks will sort of get used to being the photographer, and also this concept of making a picture, right? Of understanding all of those different aspects that we talked about today, both in terms of what you're seeing, right? And also what you might be creating yourself. So hopefully this is coming through fairly clearly, that you're going to take note of 5 images you encounter in the next few days. And if you could if you have a phone, that you could make an image of the image you're talking about, or take a screenshot if you're on a computer, or if that's a easy way for you to document the image that you're referring to. And we're going to ask you to do 5 things with each of those images. What is it saying explicitly or subtly, right? So think about, you know, not just the literal, that you have Vice President Kamala Harris speaking, you know, at an event, and there's a building behind, like not just the literal, but also, you know, how is the angle, how are the lighting, what's the mood, like all those things that we put in the chat about what makes up a photograph. So think about that for the first one. And then the context, right? What is the setting that this is? Is this a press conference? Is this a sporting event? Is it an advertisement? Is it a selfie from your phone, right? These are all fair game, right? So any of those types of images. And then third, where was the image taken, right? Start getting used to documenting, okay, I saw this ad, you know, on the bus, I saw, you know, this one, you know, scroll by me, you know, on social media, you know, and that you're capturing it and then documenting it. And that will help us start, you know, getting into that habit of thinking about both where it was made, what the context it was in, who the photographer was, and how consent would work in these different arenas. So then 4, who made it? And if you don't know the actual photographer, then for example, Parmalat, or who is the commissioning agent, right? If it's a newspaper or something like that. And then start thinking about, we're going to talk about this more in our next session, where is the photographer physically? Right. So we looked at those different images, and not just looking at, you know, sort of the reception of an image, but when you look at the image, try and figure out the position of the photographer. Is the person seated? Is there additional lighting? Is it in public? Is it private? Is it, you know, all of these different things? Just try and consider the position of the photographer when you are documenting these 5 images. Okay, so a question of sending the homework by email, is that what you would like? And I think we can do that. Yes, Eve saying yes, great, perfect, we can do that. And then we'll also send a link to that evaluation. Great. And I'm seeing that we're coming to the end of our time here. So our next session is Thursday, November 30th at the same time. And I'm so glad that we could launch this off, and So great to have all of you here. And Eve, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I want to thank everybody for coming together to attend this session. And I'm excited that we are introducing art seriously into the field of palliative care, and the potential for impact and benefit is massive. Please do share some photos ahead of the next webinar. You can send the photos to info@africanpalliativecare.org, info@africanpalliativecare.org. And then we can use some photos. Remember, you must have received consent from whoever is being photographed. And then we can use some of the photos and images from various parts of Africa for learning. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed the session, and we look forward to catching up again on the 30th, same time. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we are welcome to leave at leisure. Thank you. And thank you very much, Carolina and Catherine.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.